The battle of wizards and warriors continues with iron swords. The evil wizard Malkill will take the shape of the earth, wind, water, and fire. Farewell! The fate of the world is in your hands!
You're listening to the Piercing Wizard podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Willett. I'm a professional body piercer with 20 years experience. I travel around the world teaching technique and safety classes, and I'm a member of the Association of Professional Piercers. Listen in as I talk to my friends and colleagues about our industry so we can all stay sharp.
Hi everybody, my name is Lola Slider and I'm your host of this week's episode of the Piercing Wizard podcast. Joining me this week is my co-host Ryan Willett, and we're going to be discussing a couple of upcoming events such as the APP election. Nominations have now concluded, so the election will be happening very soon. And we're also going to be sharing a little bit about my personal news of getting a work visa for the US for piercing. So we're going to chat a little bit about that. But first, Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to lately with your Patreon?
Well, I would love to tell you about that, Lola, but before I do, I would just like to say that before we started recording, you were reading excerpts from RuPaul's biography, and once I hit record, you stopped. I really wanted people to hear your relaxing narration voice. Um, but I have a new video showcasing a Hoffadravia piercing. You've performed those more than I have, but I think in the States they're really rare because it requires someone to have a myototomy. Do you wanna give a brief explanation of what a myototomy is?
No.
Okay, that's fair. A myototomy is essentially a split on the underside of the head of the penis. And I know that there'll be some people that immediately cringe just from that description, but sometimes it can be from a medical reason or from an accident with a Prince Albert piercing. But I think honestly, a lot of times it's more of a body modification choice. People might choose to have it done by a practitioner, but some people also just do those themselves at home because they're very creative with maybe a pair of scissors or something. And it creates the possibility of a rare and unique piercing. So it's essentially the top half of an apodravia, and I'd say it's probably more like the top 80 or 90% of an apodravia. But since the split is on the underside and it exposes the urethra, you can have a vertical glans piercing, and it's a really creative and interesting piercing, pretty rare for the variation. And I actually have two different clients that let me record examples of it. So I was really excited to make the video and to share it with people. But that's available now at patreon.com/RyanPBA.
You know how in Blade 2 the vampires have those, the special vampires have those little split chins where the chin opens up? Like that's what it looks like, basically.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly like that. It makes your penis look like a vampire from Blade 2.
Yeah, but one of the special ones.
One of the special ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Not Ron Perlman. It doesn't make your penis look like Ron Perlman.
No. In fact, it starts out looking like Ron Perlman and then it changes.
Speaking of changes, I'm going to change the subject. So, um, I want to start off with the joyful news because like it's difficult to fully articulate how challenging it was.
Yes,
And
the joyful news is that Salah is running for the board. We are
yes,
overwhelmed with joy. Um,
yes, that is also quite joyful.
oh, is that
But
not what you're talking about?
well, I was mainly going to focus on the fact that you can now freely travel and work in the United States for the
Oh, that.
last, yeah, that minor thing that we've been working on for the last year and a half
Yeah.
has finally finished. So it was a art what was it? Alien of Extraordinary Ability in the Arts, which is a pretty rare visa, and I think that you might potentially be the first body piercer to get that visa that I'm aware of. I mean, we know loads of people in the industry, and I think most of the people who have immigrated to the US and started working here as body piercers, I think a lot of them started out on something like a student visa or maybe a spousal visa. And I don't think I know any other body piercers specifically who have gotten that like skilled laborer in the arts visa. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't feel confident saying that other piercers don't have the same thing because the fact is I don't know, but I do know that it's incredibly rare and based on our experience, incredibly challenging. And for me, it was a massive personal achievement, but I also felt like in some way it was a community achievement because this is an industry where legitimate qualifications are either rare or non-existent. And so going down that path of proving you're an expert in something that you can't get a degree in, for example, that was challenging. So anything that further legitimizes what it is that we do and allows for it to be recognized critically by, you know, think institutions like the US government, to me is a massive deal.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud of it and I can't overstate how long it took or how much work it took. So this was not an easy process, but I also just want to make clear that I don't, and neither do you, pass any kind of judgment of any kind on anyone that's migrated in a different way. Everybody leads their own life how they need to, and we make no judgment on any other piercers that we know that are working under different circumstances. This was just something that I really wanted to do and that we really wanted to do, and we're in a position to try. So I'm really excited to be able to come over in a few weeks and do some piercings over there in the US. I'm very excited to have that experience, and I think I bring I bring myself.
I
Um,
think that's all you really have to
yeah,
bring. And people seem to already be excited to have you over here because I have my experience, Evan has his experience, but you have a different level of experience. I think we're all going to be able to strengthen each other. And I'm really looking forward for you to, in a way, almost have a piercer vacation
yeah.
because now you're a studio owner and all those responsibilities fall on your shoulders. And I don't think that you have a lot of opportunities to just reconnect with the things that make it joyful to be a piercer in the day to day, like being able to take some of those responsibilities off of your shoulders when you're here and you can just be a piercer and talk to people about curation and location and all the different items, all the different options. And then I can handle all the pain in the ass stuff in the office.
I am really excited about it, and I'm also looking forward to the positive impact that I think it's going to have on my mentality as a piercer because, like you say, when you're the owner, it's, everything stops with you, and there are things that you just really can't compartmentalize during the day that just need your attention then and there. So for me, it can be challenging still piercing full time, and then as and when things come up, you're having to deal with those things. It's difficult to find space in your head to just be present there with a customer when it feels like there's loads of other things going on in the background in your mind. That's really challenging. And some of my favorite encounters at work are when things just align and I have an oddly quiet day where nothing has gone wrong and I've not woken up to any surprises. And I can just have like a quiet day at work and someone comes in to get a piercing and I just can really enjoy the interaction for what it is. Those are still my favorite times at work where I just get to do a piercing and be fully present and enjoy the experience with the customer, which is, of course, better for the customers as well because it means they get the best of me. So I think hopefully having more of those experiences at Precision will help just like reinvigorate me when I go back to work in Forest. So in one way, it's a bit of what we would call a busman's holiday. I don't know if you guys have that expression.
A
Um,
busman's holiday?
yeah, but busman's holiday. But in another, I think it's actually something that will be really good for me.
No, no, no. You're going to have to explain some of the etymology of what the hell does that mean?
A busman's holiday is it's like an expression for when you're on holiday but you're still working.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I got the context of it, but I'm just curious as to the whole bus aspect of it. But anyway, some of the broad strokes about the process, like you said, we're not going to judge the circumstances of anyone else
No.
immigrating, emigrating to any particular country for work or personal reasons or whatever else. But for us, there was definitely like a certain level of privilege that it would be foolish for us to not admit. Like we had the means of hiring a lawyer to do a lot of this work. We had connections to so many. The term that we were using during the application process was industry notables. So many people helped us out with recommendation letters, letters of support, and just the love that went into it really meant a lot to me. Like people were writing letters and they weren't just it wasn't like a one paragraph thing where it was like, "Oh yeah, Lola can pierce good." Like they were just really kind and thoughtful things about you as a piercer and your career goals and all the different things that you've contributed to the industry, and it was really special to see that from so many people that I look up to, industry peers, industry leaders, and I really want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to help us during this process.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to take me a long time to make up for the support that I received from peers and colleagues throughout the process that supported my application. But I'm enormously grateful to everybody that helped. And I mean, it was definitely a community effort. And for me, the funny thing with the letters was it sounds terrible, but I didn't read them initially because I get really embarrassed reading nice things about myself, even if I'm alone in a room. Like, you know how sometimes you call it vanalytics, don't you? Like when you it like, you know, like vain and analytics, when it's like you look at nice things about yourself. And I think we all do it. You know, like when you post, well, maybe you, maybe not you, but when I post a cute selfie, which is every time I post a selfie,
Mm.
and I and I go on and I'm like, you know, you look at who's commented on it, who's liked it and stuff, and you get that like stupid little dopamine thing in your brain. I can't do that with like genuinely lovely things. So I couldn't read them. And then when I was prepping for the interview, like I had to go to the US consulate in London for an interview. I had to read absolutely everything, every piece of paper that went into the application. I read all of it. And at that point in particular, I was really struggling with what I was going to say in the interview because some of the things they ask you are literally questions like, why are you extraordinary in your field? And for someone like me, um, that's very difficult to answer, particularly short form, because I just seize up and think, I don't know, can I not just be good at this? Can you not just take my word for it that I'm good at this? Like it's difficult for me to say nice things about myself in that way. So I sat down and I read all of these letters and it was really emotional to read. And also like completely gave me the words that I needed to describe the work that I do and the work that I've done. So all the nice things that I could think of to say about myself, like they didn't come from me. They came from other people in the community that had said those things. So I feel like I don't just owe gratitude for people supporting my application, but literally for giving me like nice words to say about myself because I just get to embarrassed reading nice things. So I did read them all, and they were really, really lovely and incredibly kind and supportive. So I did read them, but not till the very, very last minute. And I was, I'm sure, very blushy.
I'm just a worm.
I'm just a worm.
Well, it was quite the effort to put all this stuff together. You know, like you and I basically had to compile every career achievement you've made in the last 10 to 15 years, every conference you've not just every conference you've attended or instructed at, but every conference that you've been invited to teach at, different conferences around the world that like you've probably had to decline because you've been too busy or whatever, you know, like
Yeah.
pulling together all that stuff to show that you're also an industry leader and you're someone that people look up to as an instructor and all the different work that you've done with the UK APP as medical liaison and as the president and all the different things you've done with the APP and seeing it all compiled, it was just a massive amount of really impressive work. So I was already a big fan of yours, believe it or not, but through this process, I really have kind of an intensified admiration for you professionally. I mean, personally, you're okay too, but like professionally, I think you're aces.
Well, I'm also really grateful to all of the organizations that have extended invitations to me that also help support my application. Believe it or not, if you've ever been sick of the sight of me, just know that it could be so much worse
Oh
because
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that I don't do and that I
Yeah,
have
I
to
think for every
say.
every conference that
So,
you attend, there are probably another three or four that ask you every year that you don't have time for. So
so feel lucky that this is all you're being exposed
yeah.
to, basically.
Bad news, if you're already sick of Lola, she'll be a little bit more present in the North American piercing scene very shortly.
Um, so yeah, like that was very, very long at times. I mean, we're obviously over the moon that it's come out positive now, but there were definitely some not great moments where it wasn't certain how things were going to go. And so I would just like to take the opportunity to encourage anybody else that's considering a path like this. I mean, firstly, like, don't give up. Like, don't ever, ever, ever give up because there's probably going to be a lot of times you want to. But second of all, document everything that you do. Like, I don't care if it's a doodle that you did in nursery school that's stuck on a fridge, put it in a folder. Like, everything that you've done, every like anything that features you, any kind of media, print or digital, all the little things that we have for our studios, cards and brochures, and any kind of literature like conference brochures, any kind of advertising, anything you've been on, like just stick it all in a folder or a trunk somewhere because that stuff is the basis of compiling what you've been doing this entire time. So yeah, definitely, definitely document your career. And in ways other than just being on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Like an online presence is enormously helpful as well, but just keep all of those little things that you don't think that you're ever going to need again.
Yeah. Um, there were a lot of ups and downs through the process. A lot of it was anxiety inducing, all these different kinds of deadlines and then decision making points and all this stuff. And it's tough because even if even if you have an incredibly well prepared, well thought out application, you could still get denied. You could still get rejected. It can still get kicked back to a different process earlier on. You might have to resubmit things. So, like Lola said, like you can't give up because you have to see it through until the end, get whatever support and advice you can. Certainly like consult with professionals about it for strategy. Like we had to do a lot of back and forth with our lawyer to kind of talk about the strategy of how we were going to prepare an application and what gets submitted and all that stuff. So really happy to see it done. You'll have that visa for years to come, and I'm just really excited. We're going to have this famous European piercer, this famous like UK piercer, and it's really cool just to be able to promote in that sense of like, hey, we're adding to our staff, and it just so happens to be the former president of the UK APP member, international instructor, all this experience with like rare piercing variations and all that stuff. I'm just really excited to start promoting it and to see the response that we get from it.
Yeah, it'll be hilarious when people actually meet me.
Well, so here's another thing is I'm really curious as to if Americans are going to be able to get 100% of your accent. Like you have a very subtle accent, but
Mhm.
sometimes when you get heated, you also get very Glaswegian. So I'm just really curious.
Um, I think that I just sound really polite. You know what I'm going to have to work on is not saying cunt as much I mean,
Yeah,
not
you should
at
dial that
all,
back a little bit.
but less, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It won't be 0%, but it will be less than 100%.
Yeah, it'll be a reduction.
Yeah. Well, that's all we can really go for is mitigation.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll talk more about it in the months to come and episodes to come, like your experiences piercing in the US and the differences between other countries you pierced in and on all that other stuff. So I'm really looking forward to it. But fair warning, America, Lola is coming. So, other big changes coming up, like, big change for you, starting to pierce in the US, but other big changes potentially coming would be all the different people who are about to run for the board of directors for the APP. Like the election cycle has started now. Like, voting is open now. Voting is open through December 18th of 2024. So, like, I have to make my corny, you have to get out there and you have to vote kind of pitch, because like that's how you have a valid election. You can't just have nearly 1,000 APP members. By the way, I went to the digital APP members meeting the other day. 963 members of the APP, which is insane for me because I'm pretty sure when I started going to conference and stuff, it was like 150, and now it's like nearly 1,000. I'm really curious as to who member 1,000 will end up being, but um, it's a really big deal, and we have to have a certain amount of people actually contributing and being engaged in voting for it to be a valid election. So if you're an APP business member, you should have already gotten an email from the organization that'll have your voting instructions, your voting credentials, your login. You just vote right through the website. There'll be a list of the people who have accepted their nominations with like a short little description about them, their experience, and maybe what some of their goals might be. So I don't want to pitch it too hard. I mean, obviously, I had Sala on the show. He's a close friend of mine, and he has my support for being on the board. But we also have to vote for two additional people. So I'm going to take a really careful look at everyone who's accepted their nominations and see who kind of has the same sort of mentality that I do about volunteerism and being part of a team and stuff. So what is this election cycle like for you? Because I know that you were nominated. So what went into your thought process when you get a nomination for something like that?
So I declined my nomination. I've been nominated before, and this time I actually sat with it for as long as I could before declining. And I felt really disappointed about it because I've made no secret of the fact that previous board work was not an enjoyable experience for me for lots of reasons, being during COVID lockdown time and all this kind of stuff. But for lots of reasons, it was not an enjoyable experience for me, and I definitely needed a good break from that. So I declined 2 years ago when I was nominated, I think. And this year was the first time that I really thought, like, maybe this is something that I could like try and get involved in. Like, obviously, it doesn't mean that you would actually get elected for anything, but you could potentially run for this. And I do think that I have skills that are useful to organizations like the APP. And just like you, I like having little work projects and things to keep me busy so I don't get into mischief. So I felt really disappointed in myself for declining, but at the same time, I just felt like I'm still not in a space where I'd be able to perform the role properly. And I mean, I posted a lot about it on my Facebook. Obviously, most people that listen to this aren't going to be on there. But basically, I still feel like there is a culture of treating volunteers for the organization in an unfairly negative way that I don't always think meets the standard of professionalism that it should. And I just wasn't prepared to be on the receiving end of that yet again. And I know you've done board work as well, so I know that you know what it's like, but something just seems to happen. I think when you join the board or get to join the board where people think it's okay to speak to and about you in a way that would otherwise be completely inappropriate in any other professional setting. And something that I said in the post that I made was that if you want to be represented by professionals, you should probably be a professional. And I think that that's something that as a community we could still work on a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think that I personally got hammered too hard when I was on the board, thankfully. But during my term, like I was on the APP's board from 2016 to 2019, and uh, I'm very appreciative that I was not actively on a board during the pandemic, which you were, and I saw how people just got really nasty because I think when you're on the board, they don't still see you as an individual. Even if you have some sort of personal relationship or connection, or you've had conversations before that have been completely professional and lovely, once you're on the board, they start thinking of you in this collective. They start thinking of you as the board, and they stop thinking that, like, well, this board is made up of volunteers, people that are doing this for no money, that are finding time to do this in between having families, having studios, having other life responsibilities. And like, I don't think either of us would ever want to tell people to stop criticizing
No.
organizations, because that's an important part. Like, you have to contribute feedback. You have to say, like, well, I agree with this or I disagree with this, but the manner in which you say it sometimes just gets so icky. I don't really know how to fully describe it better than that without swearing, but like sometimes people just they forget that it's a person, and you can talk to a person if you have a conflict in the way you think, or whatever, or if you feel like it could be done in a different way, you can talk to the person, you can communicate. Like, but I think a lot of times people just they turn some sort of blind rage out on the internet, and it's really icky to see it sometimes.
So I think the problem is, well, one of the problems is that people conflate being nice with being professional. They think, well, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that, so I shouldn't have to be nice about it. And it's like, no, you don't, but you do have to be professional about it in the context of dealing with a professional organization that you're part of. You shouldn't be sending messages, sending emails that would be inappropriate for you to send to an employee, an employer, a colleague, because as much as members, we don't work for the APP and they don't work for us. Our closest relationship is that of colleagues, is that of peers. So if the way you're communicating doesn't meet that standard, that's not necessarily appropriate and conducive to reasonable discourse of any kind. And I think the other element to it is that harms us as a community, because something that I was very aware of with this election cycle was how many declinations I was seeing. Like there's always declinations. We always see people declining publicly because let's face it, it's also kind of nice to acknowledge you were nominated. But no, I was seeing more and more, and from people in the industry that are really looked up to, not necessarily me, but other people in the community who are looked up to, who are significant in their local communities, in their local areas, and in online spaces as well. And they're all declining. These people that folk in the community would love to see representing them on the board, they're all declining. And everyone always says the same thing. Everyone always says, oh, I just can't handle the work right now. And I just think it's bullshit. I mean, when it's work that we want to do, we always make time to do it. But I think in a lot of situations, the real reason that they aren't doing it is because they don't want to be in that role because they've seen how those people get treated, and maybe they've even been part of it themselves a little bit. They've been part of that negative treatment a little bit. So they don't want their community, their surrounding peers to suddenly turn on them and start speaking to and about them in a different way. And that's why they say no. I mean, that's part of the reason that I've said no is I'm just not prepared to be put in that situation again where I'm talked about in such a dehumanizing way by people that won't actually speak to me. And my biggest problem would definitely be, I think, bringing the board into ill repute, potentially with my temper, because I'm another thing people don't realize is when you're representing an organization, you kind of have to keep your mouth shut and not engage in petty arguments. And I am not immune to a petty argument. And so you kind of have to let people say things about you and just walk away from it and just let it hang there in the air. And I think mentally, I'm just in a space right now where if somebody wants to say something nasty about me, I'm going to be like, "Hi, let's have a fight." So that's not what the organization needs at all. So we're definitely better off right now with me not being involved. But you can see what I mean. Like the problem is, this is why we get such a small pool of people who are actually willing to put themselves in this position. So we harm ourselves by treating each other this way, and we limit the organization's growth by treating it this way. Um, of course, in this situation, it's probably best for all concerned that I'm not going to be running. But you know, in the future, it's something that I'd really like to do. So I just hope that we can mature a little bit as a community in that respect.
I think the APP election cycle could also be called fuck around and find out season because you get lots of people who are nominated for different reasons. You get some people where it's kind of a recognition of the hard work and the community service that they've already done. People who have been volunteers or instructors or mentors in whatever way, people look up to them and say, like, I would like you to represent me, to represent us on the board. But then sometimes you also get people who were nominated for like, maybe other reasons. Maybe people want to be a little bit more disruptive for better or worse, whatever. You get people who have been those long-term critics who have been saying, well, the APP does this wrong, or, I disagree with this or whatever. Sometimes those people get nominated, and then a lot of those people are the ones who are declining, and they're also making a big post about, oh, thank you so much, but I'm far too busy and far too important, and I just
Yeah,
can't take the time out of my
I see
important life.
you.
Yeah. But like I really do look up to the people who accept their nominations
Yeah.
because every board member has been a very busy person. Like you don't get to that certain level of recognition to the point where you're getting nominated if you're a do nothing kind of person, like you have to be active and you have to be a mentor in one way or another for people to put that kind of trust for a nomination. So whether I would agree with that nomination or not, whether I would personally vote for that person or not. Sometimes when I see these declinations, it's like you kind of read between the lines of them being like, well, I'm either maybe a little bit intimidated by the possibility of like, well, now it's my problem. Now I'm the person like seen as the you have to fix it. You are personally responsible for everything that's not perfect. And that's a massive amount of pressure for people. Like some people kind of rise to that challenge and be like, well, I want to see what I can do. But I think a lot of other people, um, they'll throw their critiques at the APP, but they're not necessarily ready or willing to roll up their sleeves and jump in on the work.
Mm. I think that another thing that it's good to keep in mind as well, because I know how people sometimes love a little bit of a conspiracy, is people don't realize how much boards disagree with each other. I think that there's sometimes this idea that, well, they're all just, like what do you call it, colluding together to do whatever it is
Yeah.
they want.
They're
But
all
you're
flying around on the gold-plated APP helicopter, spending our money.
the jet, the private jet.
Yeah.
Um, no, like people they should disagree. Like people are there to disagree and give different points of view and input. So, I mean, I don't know what it was like for you. I just know what it was like for me, but there were definitely instances where like people disagreed totally professionally about things and had different points of view and decisions were made based on those things. So,
Well, I,
um,
I think that that's a really important part of any organization, any board of directors, because you can't just have it be one person making all the decisions. Like the reason you have five people, seven people, however many people involved in these boards is because you want to have those different voices. You want ideas to be shared and really thought out and discussed and tweaked so that it serves the community and doesn't just serve an individual.
Well, I hope that maybe one year in the future, I'll be able to feel confident accepting and running and, you know, maybe at some point one day I'll be able to actually get on the board and represent, more of the international community. Like I've said a few times before, I would love for there to be more international representation in the organization because it's so much more international now than it was when I joined. I mean, when I joined, it was 2016, and I think the members were in the 600 range. So to go from that to almost 1,000, and I think when you look at the little member map, there's a lot more pins around the world now than there
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
So it is something that I would really like, all jokes aside. I know I joke about being a little honey badger, but like I would really like to contribute and help. And I think there's things that I'm good at. I really do. But for the time being, I'm just going to take part by making sure that I vote. And I think that, if you're listening, if you're a studio owner, studio manager, and you have multiple members of staff that are members, just, remind them, encourage them to all make their votes as well. That could help.
Yeah, I think that if you're a studio owner, senior piercer or whatever, and you have multiple members in your studio, it's important to stay on it. I mean, don't harass people or anything, but just that gentle reminder of like, hey, did you vote? This will only take you a couple of minutes. Just log in. If you already know the people that are running and you already have an opinion as to like this person would be good or this person maybe not so much, then you can vote really quick. If you're unsure, like sometimes there's that layer of it's not exactly intimidation, but sometimes newer piercers or piercers that haven't really felt a lot of connection to the wider community, they might not recognize all the names that are running. They might not really know people's strengths or weaknesses. So there'll be some information for you when you log in. You can see all the people that have accepted their nominations, and a lot of them have submitted little bios and different things about their experience and projects they're interested in. So please just take the minute. And if you don't vote, you are not allowed to complain until you until you run yourself. If you vote, you can complain all you want, and I will listen to it. But if you don't vote, I'm not really going to take your criticisms quite as validly. Validly? Is that a word? Seriously, I would love to see you on the board of the APP. I
Oh,
would try really hard. It's like when people have those goats as pets and they have to put the pool noodles on their horns so that they don't hurt anybody.
you're gonna
That would
put
be
pool
like,
noodles on me.
yeah, I'm gonna wrap you in pool noodles when you're on the board just so
Brian
that
has
you don't hurt
pool
anybody.
noodles. Doesn't Brian have those pool noodles that look like needles?
He does. He travels around with them to be prepared for interacting with aggressive body piercers.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're covered.
Yeah, we're covered. But yeah, so like I see a lot of good things on the horizon for the APP, but it always takes work. Like without people that actually show up to do the work, the organization just falls apart. So it's like if there's a project that you want to see get to a finish line, whether it's something that's already in the works or something totally new, like the best way to get it there and to get us there wherever you think there should be is you have to get involved. So whether that's running for the board or whether that's just getting involved in committee work. Like if you feel like you might want to be nominated in the future, just so you know, there's going to be another election cycle next spring of 2025. There'll be another election cycle because if there are 7 people on the board, they have a staggered election process. So you still have that kind of link in the chain where people can kind of train the incoming people. Onboarding is the term. You don't want to just have 7 completely new people that don't know how to do some of the administrative tasks or keep like current projects going. So there'll be another election cycle next spring. If you feel like you want to be involved, the best thing to do is start to get some experience as a public speaker, as a volunteer, as maybe a committee member. If you're an APP member, you can go to the website. There's a form you can fill out that says, I want to be a volunteer. I want to do some committee work. You can put your information there. So then when there is a committee that's looking for extra help, they look at that list and they say, well, this person says that they have some sort of experience level that might help us, or enthusiasm that might help us, or just time that might help us. And that's where they pull their volunteers from. So get involved, get experience with volunteering. And then if you want to run for the board one day, I think that that's fantastic.
You know that scene in Underworld where Kate Beckinsale isn't having a good time, so she decides to go and wake up Bill Nye, who's asleep in his little vampire coma. Remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
And they do something where she, I think, puts her blood into like a tube, and the blood gets fed into Bill Nye, and that's how he gets all his memories. They actually based that scene off of what transferring boards is basically like. I think they have
Uh-huh.
a similar process.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's
On a
a
way
really
to
important part of the onboarding process is you all drink each other's blood.
I mean, yeah, I just assumed that everybody knew that. Is that not?
I think it's really cute that like whenever we're talking about important business things, you're like, let me reference this obscure film that 90% of people probably haven't seen.
Oh, obscure. How, how is Underworld obscure?
Hold on one second. I'm gonna see if my food just got here.
Okay. Underworld is not obscure.
My food is here. I don't want to. My
That
food is here. I don't want to interact with a human being though, so I'm gonna wait until they just leave it on my stairs and then I'll get it.
that awful vampire movie with James Woods was obscure.
Awful.
Yeah. Well, it
I
was
thought that movie was
obscure.
great.
What movie were you watching?
Vampires. The hit film, John Carpenter's Vampires.
Oh my God, is it really called Vampires? And I couldn't remember what it what it was called. You
Yeah,
know the
that's
one.
why I thought it was funny that you were like, that vampire film. What was it called? Vampires?
Well, it's not a very creative name.
Yeah. I think it was called The Bus That Couldn't Slow Down Ever.
You could have called it The People Who Are Allergic to Sunlight.
I love the whole I love the whole modern process about having food delivered and how it's completely removed any human interaction from your day, where it's like you can just, I mean, you pay way too much money, but then you can just like open your door, go outside in your pajamas and disheveled scents, and just there's a bag of food waiting for you.
Okay, I promise after this, I'll stop talking about vampires. But since it's
Uh-huh.
on my brain now, do you think if you were a vampire and you got to like delivery or Uber Eats or whatever, that the guy would turn up and then he would just knock on the door and be like, "This is Gary," and then he would like take a photo of him next to your door, and then you,
Maybe, but I think like if we're being realistic, I think if a vampire was ordering like DoorDash, they would just like order a cheeseburger, and then when it gets there, then they would just like bite the delivery person. Probably not as sustainable as your model, but anyway, let's go ahead and wrap it up.
every time.
Uh-huh. So if I haven't mentioned it already, I'm massively proud of you for this entire visa process. You, Lola Slider, UK piercer, soon to be US piercer. I'm massively proud of you and seeing all of your achievements kind of collected in that format. I'm just massively impressed by you. So I'm looking forward to you coming and working here. I'm looking forward to being able to force you to do all the things that I don't want to do. You can do all the paired nostrils.
No
Um,
problem.
you can do all the reverse PAs. You can do all the foreskin related piercings. That's all going to go into your column.
You know how you love my special trick for marking paired nostrils? The trick is
Oh, you
just
mean
to
how you just do it and it's
yeah,
perfect?
the trick is you just draw the marks on in the right place and then pierce
Uh-huh.
them. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, maybe
Yeah.
one day I can learn from you and I can learn how to correctly mark.
See, that's what I'm saying. Never give up, you know?
Uh-huh. Thank you. Uh, One more reminder, vote. If you're an APP member, you only have until December 18th, 2024. Log in and vote. It'll only take you a few minutes. You don't even have to vote for Lola. You can vote for somebody else. But I'm going to wrap it up here. Check out my videos at patreon.com/RyanPBA if you would. I would really appreciate it. And is there anything that you would like to say before we sign off and before you get to watch me eat my food?
I feel like I've been grossly mischaracterized as an angry goat because I live in Glasgow, and by Glaswegian standards, I am a delicate wee flower.
Yeah, you're like an ambassador practically. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll be back with more episodes soon.
Bye.
For more information about the show, visit piercingwizardpodcast.com or like Piercing Wizard Podcast on Facebook. For more info about your host, visit precisionbodyarts.com or search Ryan PBA on Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr. If you enjoy the show, you can subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcast, and Google Play. Music by Benny B. Blanco. Show copyright 2017, Precision Body Arts LLC, all rights reserved.